Hey, I have a special guest with whom I want to discuss Matt Gaetz, the embattled Florida congressman. For those who were tuned in last week when I was discussing this situation, you might recall that I said that I had texted Congressman Gaetz and invited him to discuss this situation. His immediate response, his sole response, was to send to me a link to the Washington Examiner, which I guess is his response to the story, right? Why would he share with me that link unless he wanted the story that accompanied the link to speak for him? Here's what that story said in part. On Tuesday, the New York Times reported that the Justice Department is investigating whether Gaetz had a sexual relationship with a 17-year-old and paid her to travel with him. Gaetz has called the report totally false. Gaetz told Axios that his lawyers told him that he was not a target, but a subject of an investigation regarding sexual conduct with women. The Florida Republican countered that the report on Twitter and in statements to Axios and Fox News with a claim that his family is being extorted for $25 million and that the people pushing stories about an investigation into his relationships with women are people extorting him and the subjects of an FBI extortion investigation over the last few weeks. The documents in Gaetz's possession detail an alleged scheme that revolves around attempts by former Air Force intelligence officer Bob Kent and Beggs and Lane attorney David McGee, a former federal prosecutor, to free ex-FBI agent turned private investigator Robert Levinson from imprisonment in Iran. It's a complicated story, but I want to get to Bob Kent, who was just referenced in that piece and joins me now. Mr. Kent, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
So why don't we begin this way? Who was Robert Levinson, and what does he have to do with you?
Robert Levinson was a former FBI agent who was captured in Kisk Island 14 years ago by the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. What he has to do with me is I had no interest in Robert Levinson. I mean, of course, I would like to see him get back, but I'm a US-based representative of a network, of an Iraqi-based network that's involved with researching the Iranians and the militias that they support. And we were providing information on their activities to various government agencies in the hopes that the US would assist my network. In April of 2018, my network was tracking a former Al-Qaeda operative. It was number 3 in the organization at the time, I believe. His name was Saif al-Adali. He was based out of Bandar Abbas, Iran, and he was moving back and forth across the border into Iraq, and he was training ISIS elements, and he was training the Shia militias that the Iranians support. And he was causing trouble for my network, and we were trying to get, we were providing information to the US government in the hopes that they would do something about it. And we had an FBI liaison who was attached to a military unit who told us, no, it's not Saif al-Adali. It's definitely not him. I went back to the network. Are you sure it's Saif al-Adali? They said yes. So I asked the question, how can I prove to you that this is Saif al-Adali? And it was a joke. I didn't realize it was a joke. They said, find Bob Levinson. So on April 15th, 2018, I tasked the network. And in May of that year, May 20th, I traveled overseas to meet with my research manager. And then on the 14th of June, 2018, I notified the FBI that I could secure proof of life. Specifically, it was a 41-second video and a blood sample. The FBI was not responsive. I had agents that would call and talk to me, but nothing was happening. So a few weeks later, I contacted David McGee. David McGee checked me out, and we started to get the government, try to get them interested in backing us to purchase it, because we didn't have any money. We wanted to purchase the proof of life and attempt to rescue David McGee. Levinson.
Levinson.
Yeah, and I never contacted the family. I never spoke with any members of the family. And the reason for that is literally thousands of people have contacted the family over the years saying, hey, we know where he is. We can get him out. I didn't want to come off like that. So I specifically spoke with McGee because he was, in the media as Levinson's attorney, his representative, and he was a former federal prosecutor, so he would know how to work the system.
In other words, McGee, don't get too far ahead of me because it's complicated and I need to backtrack and backfill a couple of things. McGee is a lawyer in private practice who had been a federal prosecutor, and you believe him or knew of him to represent the Levinson family?
Yes, I read about him. So when I was not aware of who Robert Levinson was until the agent said, "Hey, find Bob Levinson." So then I did research, as you would, and came across David McGee's name because he's representing the family. There was a book written about Bob Levinson that McGee's quoted extensively in the book, and that's how I identified David.
Okay, Mr. Kent, I should have begun with an even more basic question. What do you do for a living?
I'm a consultant, and specifically, I do a lot of research work in the Middle East.
So it's been reported that you formerly worked in Air Force intelligence. Is that accurate?
That's correct. I left the Air
Okay,
Force.
so it sounds to me like you still have skin in the game, so to speak. Is that fair?
That's fair. So I spent a lot of time in Iraq, and a lot of the people that I work with were killed in Iraq. And everybody that I know that was killed, they were all killed by Iranians in Iraq or Iranian militias, or supported militias in Iraq. So that was my interest there. Plus,
so it's what I'm gleaning from this conversation so far is that Bob Kent is not someone who was on a mission to find Robert Levinson. Much to the contrary, you weren't even aware of who Robert Levinson was, but somehow serendipitously, this information comes into your possession, which suggests that contrary to what the Trump administration told the Levinson family, Levinson may in fact be alive. Do you have proof of life of Robert Levinson?
in June and July of 2020, we took 2 proof of life videos. We provided them to the government. They told us that they were inconclusive. I had them analyzed by a video analyst, an expert that's used by the Southern District of New York. His response was basically the same. It's 50-50. You can't say it definitely is Robert Levinson. You can't say it's not Robert Levinson.
Well, where was Levinson recorded in this proof of life video?
Kermanshah Prison, Iran.
Being held by whom?
Being held by IRGC, the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps.
Have you yet put in the public domain the proof of life videos that you're referring to?
I have not.
And might you do so soon?
Yes.
Okay, how soon?
I believe they're going to be released tonight on CNN.
Okay, well, that would be great. And hopefully it'll be with Chris Cuomo. So far, a very interesting story. Now, what the hell does it have to do with Matt Gaetz?
So in July of 2020, we attempted to rescue the person in the videos. The person I believe was Robert Levinson. The operation fell apart. It was leaked to the Iranians, and I lost 4 people. We know 2 of them were captured and killed by the Iranians for sure. We believe the same happened to the other 2. After that happened, I basically shook hands with Dave, gave him my apologies that it didn't work out, and moved on. Said, hey, we're done here.
Meaning David McGee, the Levinson family lawyer.
Yes, David McGee.
Okay.
Basically done. So we don't have any money. We don't have any more resources to go after Levinson ourselves. And we believe that maybe the Iranians have killed him at this point. We don't know for sure. And the U.S. government did not seem interested in looking for him. And as a matter of fact, they told us that they believed that the whole thing was a ruse. That it was, we were not actually we were not actually going to rescue Robert Levinson, but it was a trap to catch my team and myself. In October of last year, Dave reached out to me again, and he said, hey, I have a friend here in Florida who is interested in going after Levinson. He's hearing that he is alive from his own sources, and that money and political access flow through this man, and it's somebody that you can trust to work with to get this done. So I said, well, let me see if my network can even access him. So we're back to the network. They do what they do, and the response that came back is yes, they believe Levinson is alive, and they could probably try to get, they'll try to get him out, but the only way to do it this time would be top down from the executive level. So when we worked last time, we worked bottom up, and we used prison guards and people like that to try to, rescue Levinson. This time, to get it done, we would have to go from the top down and work from the top levels of the government in Iran. Much more expensive. So we
Okay,
figured.
get me to Gaetz, because I don't want to run out of time. This is so important.
Okay, so we needed the money. The way we were going to fund the operation didn't work, and so we needed a backup. So we went to Don Gaetz. Is also from North Florida. He's known as a very successful businessman, has access to that type of money. So I reached out and contacted Don Gaetz with the text.
Matt Gaetz's father.
Yes.
Okay, and this is, now you're discussing that which Gaetz is characterizing as extortion. So tell my audience, what exactly did you do?
So I went in and I met with Mr. Gaetz at his office in the law firm that he uses down in Destin, Florida, on the 17th of March, St. Patrick's Day. And I sat down and I showed him the 2 videos that we took. And I explained to him that because of the rescue operation, we believe that this is Bob Levinson. We believe that we can get him out. I said that his son was having having legal issues and might want to generate some goodwill and help us, participate in the rescue effort. And specifically, we needed funding. Don offered to have his son contact the president. We said, this is not politics isn't going to get it done. The U.S. has shown no interest, and anytime we've worked with the government, our efforts have been leaked to the Iranians, and we've had bad results. This is strictly a function of money, and we wanted a $25 million loan to buy him back. And I explained that, in no way am I trying to extort him, and if he decides not to help us, he'll never hear from me again. I'll never contact the press about it. But I showed him the videos. So
you showed Matt Gaetz's father the two proof of life videos that you think show Robert Levinson to be alive.
Yes, and I explained to him that we tried to rescue the person that was in those videos, and that I lost 4 people, and that we had reason to believe that he was still alive. Yeah.
The 4 people who you say you quote unquote lost, are these former U.S. military types? Are these mercenaries? Who are they?
No, so they're counter-regime people that are working against the Iranian regime.
I see. Are they Iranian or are they Iraqi?
It's not easy. It's a mix. So
okay. I don't want to get off on that tangent. Let me stay very, very focused on Matt Gaetz. So I have, Bob, in my hands this document that was part of the Washington Examiner coverage, which is titled Project Homecoming. And yes. Project Homecoming is summarized in a 2.5-page memo, essentially setting forth what you're describing, the idea that if Matt Gaetz's father will put up $25 million, it can win the release of Robert Levinson. And essentially, Matt Gaetz will receive all the glory, including being pardoned by President Biden for his alleged sexcapades. First of all, is that a fair summary of what Project Homecoming envisions?
Except for the pardon part. So it generate goodwill. And we certainly talked about, maybe you could do that, but that's not the power that I have, right? So it was strictly, Matt Gaetz is in need of good publicity, and I'm in need of $25 million to rescue Robert Levinson.
So Matt Gaetz says that's extortion. Is it extortion?
I never threatened the man. Matter of fact, it was the opposite. I told him if he decides not to help us, he'll never hear from me again. And I said, if you want to help us keep everything legal and above board, it'll have to go through the law firm. It'll have to go through David McGee, and any money that's paid will have to be paid into his escrow account so that it could be tracked and everybody, all legal proprieties are observed. So
how many times did you meet with Gaetz's father, Don Gaetz?
I met with him at 9:30 in the morning. I was on a plane back home that afternoon. I never met with the man again. I sent him a thank you text the following day. But other than that, I had no other interaction with him.
Do you now believe that he was wearing a wire when he was speaking with you?
I don't know if he was. It hasn't been reported in the media. I hope he was.
Do you have regrets over anything you said to him?
No,
In the operation, first of all, the Operation or Project Homecoming memo, is this your handiwork?
I didn't write it. My input is certainly in there, but that was written by my partner.
Okay, and your partner, is that Stephen Alford?
That's correct.
And Stephen Alford has been characterized as someone who has previously faced fraud and extortion charges. What was his role in all of this?
He was the person that David McGee introduced me to back in October, and he was he was upfront about his past, but he did have an expressed interest in getting Levinson back, and I worked with him.
So here's what it says in part, and I'm tweeting this so that people can read the 2.5-page memo. In exchange for the funds being arranged and upon release of Robert Levinson, Congressman Gaetz shall be given full credit for facilitating the release of Mr. Levinson. Congressman Gaetz shall also be on the plane that returns Mr. Levinson to freedom and shall be the person to reunite Mr. Levinson and his family and bring Mr. Levinson back to the United States. I have to say, with no disrespect, it sounds a little wag the dog-ish. I mean, the only thing it's missing is, the Dustin Hoffman character saying that's nothing. We can figure this out.
I can't help how it sounds. All I can say is a lot of people have come forward over the years to try to help us get Levinson back. They've all fit a mold. They've all been similar to the situation that Congressman Gaetz finds himself in now. And the fact is, I do have the proof of life videos. I did try to rescue the person that's in those videos back in July and believe that that person is still alive and around now. And I believe that person to be Robert Levinson. And it's a function of money to get him back. It's going to cost about $25 million to get that man back.
So to hear your explanation of this, you had this independent effort, meaning had nothing to do with Matt Gaetz or Don Gaetz. You were involved in an effort that tried to free Robert Levinson, whom you have a strong suspicion is alive and being held in captivity in Iran. And then independent of that, Gaetz gets himself jammed up, and either you or Stephen Alford recognize, hey, his father is a deep pocket. Maybe this represents opportunity insofar as the old man writes a big check. We're happy to give the son the credit because all we want to do is rescue a former FBI agent who's now being held in Iran. Is that pretty much the summation of it?
Yes.
And then Gaetz comes along, goes on that wacky interview that he does with Tucker Carlson initially, and essentially tries to throw all of this in the kitchen sink at the wall to leave the impression that whatever it is he's being investigated for, hey, first and foremost, he's the victim of extortion. I mean, that's what I'm taking away from my conversation with you.
Yes. And if the congressman was actually worried about extortion and that was his motive, he could have done the same thing by contacting the FBI and left the Levinson family out of it. And that poor family has just been through the ringer, I would imagine, the past 14 years. And Robert Levinson is the constituent of Congressman Gaetz. So he's basically torturing the Gaetz family to divert attention from himself.
What was Don Gaetz's reaction to you explaining this whole situation and putting forth the proposal for Project Homecoming?
So at first he started laughing and he said, we get these extortion attempts all the time. And I said, well, stop. This is not an extortion attempt. I'm not trying to extort him. I'm not, that's not what we're doing here. Look, let me show you the videos. And then we focused on the videos and then he got interested. And when we left it, he actually sent me a text the next day or that evening saying, the offer to go to the president is still there. Like it will help politically, but we're not interested in helping with money, with funding.
So he let you know that day that he wasn't going to write the check for 25 mil.
Right. And I thought it was done. And then a week later, he contacted David McGee and asked to meet with him. And then last Monday, I got a call from David telling me, Don agreed to fund the project, and I'll be sending you, operating money on Tuesday. And then that evening, Congressman Gaetz went on the news.
Well, in retrospect, do you believe that that second phone call where they told you they weren't interested was now to try and sort of lure you in for the purpose of walking through this in full view of the FBI?
The phone call was never to me; it was to McGee, and that's what he claims it is. So,
Has the FBI interviewed you?
Yes,
What can you tell us about that?
I'm cooperating. I told them basically the same thing I told you.
Well, one other question that I had about the 2.5-page statement, it says, the team that delivers Mr. Levinson to the President of the United States shall strongly advocate that President Biden issue a presidential pardon or instruct the Department of Justice to terminate any and all investigations involving Congressman Gaetz. The team has been assured by the President that he will strongly consider such matters because he considers the release of Robert Levinson a matter of national urgency. What's the basis for that statement?
It's not my statement, so I don't know.
In other words, you have no reason to believe that President Joe Biden has been directly asked, would he give a pardon to Matt Gaetz if Matt Gaetz could help win the freedom of Robert Levinson?
I have never spoken with President Biden or anybody from his administration.
Understood. But there's no basis that you have to believe that that's necessarily true, that he's given some assurance.
No.
Is there anything else? I mean, you're watching yourself all of a sudden. You strike me as a guy who likes to remain in the shadows, and that this is probably a bit uncomfortable to all of a sudden see your name published in major outlets across the country following the Gaetz situation. Is there anything else that you've watched reported, read reported, that you want to correct the record and make sure that people understand?
The only thing I think people need to understand about this is that when I spoke with Don Gaetz, he believed that the person in that video, at least 50% was Robert Levinson. So when his son went on television, they knew that they were causing repercussions for Levinson if he's alive and creating anguish for the Levinson family. That's the part that's missing from this story.
Bob, did I understand you to say that in addition to the two videos, there was some other form of proof of life, or did I misunderstand?
No, there's just the two videos.
Two videos. There's no blood, there's no DNA, there's no...
Originally in 2018, there was a blood sample which we did not recover, and there was a different video which we did not recover.
Do you today, the 5th of April of 2021, do you believe that Robert Levinson is alive?
Before Matt Gaetz made his statement, yes, I believe Robert Levinson was alive in Iran. I don't know what happened to him now. I don't know what the Iranians will do with him.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. The thing that strikes me as unusual, I mean, the whole case is unusual. This whole story is like a dime store novel, but help me understand, why would the federal government not be receptive to whatever information, whatever evidence you might have? Why would the Trump administration have told the Levinson family that they believe that he has passed and then not be receptive, the federal government, to whatever information you might have that an American former FBI could in fact be alive? I would think they would welcome you with open arms. What am I missing?
I don't know. I don't work for the federal government. I don't know why they're not interested, but I can tell you repeatedly attempts to contact people have failed. I contacted Pence's office directly, Vice President Pence's office directly in October of 2018. Had multiple conversations with his aide at the time, Olivia Troye, sent them multiple emails. There was never any follow-up. We didn't get any traction on Levinson until January of 2019. Met with people at the State Department, and that actually they agreed that they would help in the search for proof of life for Robert Levinson, but it took a year before any assistance was given to me.
Bob, is there anything else? I'm very appreciative that you would come on my program and share all of this detail, because I've seen you quoted in drips and drabs, but I don't think that you've fully explained the way that you have here. Is there anything else that you wanted to make sure that I gave you opportunity to detail?
Just that I still believe that Robert Levinson is alive. I believe that there's an opportunity to get him out. And I believe that the US government needs to ask the hard questions of Iran. Where is Robert Levinson?
And also, you want the world to know that you have not extorted Matt Gaetz, Don Gaetz, or any member of the Gaetz family, the way in which was described by the congressman in that interview they gave to Tucker Carlson.
It's a fantasy that they concocted. No.
I mean, I have to tell you something. This is obviously the sort of story that gets a lot of airtime on my program. And when I discussed this last week in the aftermath of that interview, it was a caller who said it much better than I had offered. In explaining this situation, the caller said to me something like, extortion would be if Bob Kent had proof of the allegations against Matt Gaetz and said to the old man, we will release this proof unless you give us $25 million. That's not what this is all about. You've been out there working to secure the release of an American that you believe to be alive, and saw opportunity in the fact that Gaetz was now jammed up, that his father is wealthy, and you thought, well, here's an opportunity where we'll give the kid the glory if we can use all of this to release Robert Levinson.
Yes, that's exactly it. And my motivation has always been the same. We're trying to highlight what the Iranians are doing in Iraq and other countries, the terrorists that they're supporting, the militias that they're backing. That's what we've always been trying to highlight. That's why we went after Robert Levinson in the first place, to get people to pay attention to that, people in our government to pay attention to what they're doing. They mean the Iranians.
Bob Kent, thank you so much for your time. Hope we get to see those proof of life videos soon, and I appreciate your being here.
Thank you.